the last thing that caught my eye is we talked about Candace Owens last week, and Candace Owens has been up to some weird stuff. I mean, I think she's an honest person, but who's been, I think, targeted for some deep psychological operations and has been sort of, it seems, almost deconstructed and reconstructed on certain very important points of what shapes her identity. But the messaging, and we talked about that, how she's getting her new understanding of what is the United States from British priests and MI6 connected authors. We talked about that last week, who are like helping her understand that the entire U.S. Revolution and the U.S. experience is pretty much a Freemasonic fraud that got Americans to be separated from God, as if God is somehow located in the loyalty to the British monarchy and the system of the British divine right of kings. And that the American Revolution being a break from that was, as she spoke about with Milo in that interview clip that we had watched, a separation, of a breakaway, like a Luciferian breakaway from God. So she's onto some weird stuff, but she recently came out.
And just to specify further, and she came to that conclusion by speaking to Catholic priests specifically. Yeah. I'm not attacking Catholicism, but the fact that they're Catholic priests in London, because remember, like Britain under Henry VIII broke from the Catholic Church and became the Anglican Church. So Catholic priests in London, and after reading a book written by a guy who, we went and looked at his Wikipedia page last week, openly admits, he's like, yeah, I've never actually formally worked with MI6, but I've worked with them throughout my entire career, including like in some pretty important situations like Libya when they overthrew Gaddafi. I was working with MI6 to get like narratives out. What?
Yeah.
And he's the one who wrote the book that said that basically like postulates that the American Revolution was a Freemasonic conspiracy to subjugate humanity, basically.
Yeah, and this is his. I still have the picture from last week, Nicholas Hager, and people can watch that little show we did. I started reading that book. It arrived in the mail 2 days ago, so I've been just breezing through it. It's kind of a small book from 1989, but very, very sophisticated narrative reframing. And I'll have a more thorough assessment of that when I finish this book. But it's very. He knows what he's doing. And this is a guy, keep in mind, this Nicholas Hager guy, who is, this guy is so eyeballs deep. He's written like 90 books. He was the guy assigned to tutor Emperor Hirohito's son. Emperor Hirohito himself of Japan, having been made an initiate of the Order of the Garter of England. So this guy was a member of the Order of the Garter, which is a sort of English crusader tribalist order that idolized the knighthoods, the elegant, dragon killing knighthoods of St. George, around which the flag of St. George, which is making a pretty big wild comeback right now with the whole Unite the Kingdom movement that Tommy Robinson has been leading with a bunch of Knights Templar. They're literally called the New Templar Order, and they're big parts of what are this movement that is adjacent to and interfacing with Tommy Robinson, but they're also very obsessed with Solomon's Temple. They're very obsessed with restoring the kingdom of Jerusalem. It's a big, big driving force of a lot of this stuff, but they're also obsessed with trying to create a new, it's a different kind of nationalism. They're trying to take authentic nationalism and make it more tribal and militant. Yeah. So the type of nationalism that I think we could see when you look at people like Albert Pike, the Boston-based disciple of Caleb Cushing, the Scottish Rite Grandmaster who managed William Garrison back in the 1830s, 1840s, who was another disciple, ironically, William Garrison being a radical abolitionist and a member of the Scottish Rite Northern branch, and then the Boston-based Albert Pike, who ends up leading the Southern branch of the Scottish Rite in the decades before the actual Civil War breaks out in America. But if you look at Albert Pike, this guy is organizing the Order of the Golden Circle. They're running terrorist operations against abolitionists. You have William Lloyd Garrison organizing terrorist operations against, Confederate states as well, like the shooting of Harper's Ferry. He deploys this idiot John Brown to go and organize a militia to like basically murder a ton of people on Harper's Ferry in 1859 as his way of trying to, counteract the plague of slavery. Now, both sides appear to be like running a chaos operation to radicalize both extremes to tear the nation apart, to basically cannibalize itself. And I think when you look at it from the standpoint of these Scottish Rite and also Mormon, and I couldn't help but notice that a lot of the stuff that happened was around Mormon territory in Utah, which is itself a Freemasonic hub. Like the Nuovo Lodge that was set up by Joseph Smith was part of what created the first Mormon War, right, in Missouri, the Missouri Mormon Wars of 1838. That was the first civil war in America.
Interesting.
And then there was another one, and then another one in 1950. The last one being in 1858. So these were all being organized by these Freemasonic networks. This guy Morgan, right? People know of the guy who initiated the Anti-Masonic Movement, was the disappearance of William Morgan. William Morgan did disappear. It's true. And he did write a book. That's true too, talking about what were the rituals of at least the first 3 degrees of Masonry in 1825 or 1826. Now he disappeared. The book was then massively published after he disappeared. And we were all told he died. He was killed by Freemasons from Canada who didn't like the fact that he was exposing their secrets. But now justice reigned as his book was still published posthumously and really published. Like this thing was printing more than the Bible. And it sparked this anti-Masonic movement. It starting in 1826 that went on to like 1840. And you had anti-Masonic parties. Like 95% of the lodges in North America were shut, or at least in the United States were shut down. But did William Morgan actually die? And that's the big question. Did William Morgan actually die? Because there was never a body, and they just speculated that he did. Well, here's the weird thing. His wife immediately, upon his disappearance, his wife immediately gets married again. Who does she get married to? Of all of the people in the United States, of all of the people to choose from, she marries Joseph Smith. She becomes one of like the 25 wives of Joseph Smith. That's a weird choice of a husband.
Wow.
Also 1840, apparently like 15 years after William Morgan has disappeared, he's given a reverse. There's an open ceremony in a Mormon compound in Utah that delivers a reverse baptism. For some reason, I don't fully understand why, but there's this ritual that once you die, you get some form of a reverse baptism. I'm not too sure what the logic is for that. But why does that happen in a Mormon compound in Utah 15 years after he supposedly was already dead? Strange. Was it the case that he was perhaps just living in a Mormon compound? And the fact is, there's another thing too, that the when you look at the actual like headquarters, the lead temple of the Mormons in Utah, in Salt Lake, I think it's in Salt Lake City, features the Eye of Horus, right? You have that directly overhead the main entrance. You've got a variety of Masonic symbols. And for those who have been in the inner initiated realm and have like left it, have defected, they've talked about what sort of initiatory rites, what sort of scripts have to be said as they go through their rituals. And it is exactly word for word what Morgan is talking about in the book that was published so-called posthumously in 1826, that then justified this massive purge of Masonic lodges. So who was actually benefiting? When you read Albert Pike's Morals and Dogma, as well as when you read his counterpart, who is the Grand Master of the Northern Jurisdiction, both of them, whose name I'm just forgetting all of a sudden, J.J. Gorgas, that's him, who's the head of the Northern Jurisdiction of Freemasonry, at the same time as Pike is running and overseeing the reform of the Southern Rite. Both of them speak positively about Morgan, even though they're Freemasons, and even though Morgan supposedly created and justified this massive shutdown, this anti-Masonic movement. Both of them, Pike and Gorgas, speak positively about Morgan and the anti-Masonic movement. They like it. Why do they like it? Because all of the Republican lodges were purged. The Henry Clay Lodge was purged. All of the lodges that were actually trying to keep the fight of the American Revolution alive, they were purged. And as Pike and Gorgas both say, it was like a cleansing reform, so that by the end of the anti-Masonic movement, when that petered out, the only lodge that became dominant was the Scottish Rite, which itself was seated by the United Grand Lodge of England, because the Scottish Rite came out of the Charleston, Charleston Lodge in South Carolina. That was a British lodge set up by Augustine Prevost. And Augustine Prevost, whose brother was also a Grand Master of that lodge, was a British agent. He was a British soldier, but a British grand strategist, not just a soldier, who oversaw the secret police operation that was supposedly disbanded in 1775, but the actual lodge continued on. And that lodge became, in 1801, the first Scottish Rite Lodge in America. But that was what he set up. And his brother, James Prevost, had a lawyer. That lawyer was Aaron Burr. And when James Prevost died, James Prevost's wife marries Aaron Burr. And that's why Aaron Burr, when he left the United States after the trial, when he was found to be behind the secession plot in 1807, to create you heard about the 1807 secession plot that Aaron Burr ran, right?
Oh yeah. I was actually just looking at it right here. Finish your thought, and then I'll go where I was going to go with it.
Well, after that trial, they didn't have enough smoking gun evidence at the time, so he didn't go to jail, though he should have, for being a British agent running this attempted secession of the United States around this Western breakaway that would have also involved getting the U.S. into an early war with Spain to take control of Florida and New Orleans at that time, 1807. He ended up going to Britain, but to get to Britain, because everybody hated this guy. They hated this guy so badly. He tried to, part of this plan involved him deposing Thomas Jefferson and installing him as a new emperor. But he went to Canada first, where George Prevost was the Governor General of Canada, his nephew. And I was always wondering to myself, how did his nephew become the Governor General of Canada, who then gave him letters of introduction to go to Jeremy Bentham and Lord Castlereagh in England, which is what he did. And he was allowed to live in Jeremy Bentham's home, the head of British intelligence, which he did for 5 years until the War of 1812, when he was sent back in a week before the War of 1812 began. But he was there for 5 years. So how the hell did his nephew become George Prevost? And then I realized, it was because he married James Prevost's wife, and her son was made the Governor General of British Canada, who is the guy who then support. And the Prevosts, have just been a very big, I think actually the current Pope might be a Prevost, I'm not sure. But the Prevosts have been a big Genoa family from that were part of the what's called the Committee of 200, the governing council of Genoa, the sort of sister city to Venice.